The scream that tore through the autumn air was not human, and Ryder Merrick knew that sound would haunt him for the rest of his days if he did not run toward it instead of away. He had been mending the fence line between his property and the abandoned Thornhill farm when the crash shattered the afternoon quiet, followed by that terrible cry of pain and desperation. His hammer fell from his hand as instinct took over, his legs carrying him across the overgrown field toward the sagging barn that had been empty for 3 years. Ever since old Thomas Thornhill had died and his children had moved east to the cities. Ryder vaulted the broken fence and sprinted through knee-high grass gone to seed, his heart hammering against his ribs. The barn door hung open, and inside the dim interior he could see the catastrophe that had unfolded. The main support beam, rotted through by years of neglect and the weight of too many harsh winters, had given way and crashed down at an angle. Beneath it, pinned face down on the dirt floor, was an orc woman. Ryder's first instinct, trained into him by a childhood of warnings and a youth spent in the border wars, was to freeze. Orcs were the enemy. Orcs were dangerous. Orcs would kill you as soon as look at you. But the sound she made as she tried to push herself up, only to collapse again under the weight of the massive timber across her back, was so purely anguished that every instinct except the most human one fell away. He ran to her side and dropped to his knees, his hands hovering over the beam as he assessed the situation. The woman's face was turned to the side, her cheek pressed against the dirt, and he could see the greenish tint of her skin, the small tusk that protruded from her lower lip, the pointed ear that lay flat against her skull. Her eyes were squeezed shut, and her fingers clawed at the ground as she fought to draw breath under the crushing weight. "Do not move," Ryder said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I am going to get this off you." Her eyes snapped open, gold and bright with pain and fear. For a moment they simply stared at each other, human and orc, natural enemies brought together by circumstance and catastrophe. Then she managed to speak, her voice strained and rough. "Leave me. Humans will come. They will think you helped an orc. You will suffer for it." "Shut up and save your breath," Ryder told her, already moving to examine the beam more closely. It was enormous, probably 2 feet thick and at least 20 feet long, made of old-growth oak that had been the pride of the barn's construction decades ago. The weight of it had to be immense. He gripped it with both hands and pulled, throwing all his strength into the effort, but the beam did not budge even a fraction of an inch. The orc woman made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh if she had the air for it. "3 men could not lift that. 1 man has no chance. Go, please." Ryder ignored her. He moved to a different position, braced his legs, and tried again. His muscles screamed and his back protested, but the beam remained immovable. Sweat broke out on his forehead despite the cool autumn air. He released his grip and stepped back, breathing hard, his mind racing through possibilities. "Is there anyone nearby?" he asked. "Anyone who could help?" "No one who would help an orc," she said, and there was such resignation in her voice that it made something twist in Ryder's chest. He looked around the barn frantically, searching for anything he could use as leverage. There were old tools scattered in the corners, rusted and broken, but nothing that would serve. The other beams that still stood were too far away to be useful, and there was no time to ride back to his own farm for equipment. The woman's breathing was becoming more labored, more shallow. The beam was slowly crushing the life out of her. "What is your name?" Ryder asked suddenly, coming back to kneel beside her where she could see him. She blinked, clearly surprised by the question. "Why does it matter?" "Because I want to know who I am saving. My name is Ryder Merrick. I own the farm to the east." For a long moment she just looked at him, those golden eyes searching his face for something he could not name. Then she said, "Khriza. My name is Khriza." "Khriza," he repeated, committing it to memory. "I am going to lift this beam, and when I do, you are going to crawl out from under it as fast as you can. Do you understand? You cannot lift it alone. It is impossible. Watch me." Ryder stood and moved to the best position he had identified, where the beam's angle gave him the most leverage. He bent his knees, wrapped his arms around the massive timber, and locked his hands together. He thought about his father, who had been the strongest man in 3 counties before the coughing sickness took him. He thought about the years he had spent working this land, building muscle and endurance through endless days of hard labor. He thought about the war, where he had carried wounded men twice his size off the battlefield, because leaving them behind was not an option. Most of all, he thought about Khriza's eyes, and the way she had told him to leave her to die so that he would not suffer for helping her. He took a deep breath, set his feet, and lifted. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. The beam was simply too heavy, too massive, an immovable object that laughed at his efforts. His muscles strained to the point of tearing. His vision started to go dark at the edges. A sound came from his throat that was barely human, a roar of pure determination and refusal to accept defeat. And the beam moved. It rose an inch, then 2, then 6. Ryder's entire body shook with the effort, his legs threatening to buckle, but he kept lifting, kept pushing against the impossible weight until there was perhaps a foot of clearance between the timber and the ground. Now. He managed to gasp out, "Crawl." Khriza did not hesitate. Despite her obvious pain, she pulled herself forward with her arms, dragging her body out from under the beam with desperate speed. The moment Ryder saw she was clear, he released his grip and stumbled backward, the beam crashing back down to the barn floor with a thunderous impact that sent dust billowing through the air. Ryder's legs gave out and he sat down hard, his chest heaving, his arms hanging useless at his sides. His entire body felt like it was on fire, every muscle screaming in protest. But Khriza was free. She was pushing herself up to her hands and knees, coughing and gasping, but alive and mobile. "Impossible," she said, her voice hoarse. "That was impossible." "Apparently not," Ryder managed, though speaking took more effort than he wanted to admit. Khriza turned to look at him, still on her hands and knees, and for the first time he could see her fully. She was tall, probably taller than him by a couple of inches, with a strong build that spoke of a life of hard work and combat training. Her dark hair was pulled back in a braid that had come partially undone, and her skin was the deep green of summer leaves. She wore simple traveling clothes, leather trousers and a rough sponge shirt, both covered in dust from the barn floor. Her face was striking, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw, and her tusks, though small, gave her an exotic beauty that Ryder had never seen before. She was also clearly in pain. The way she held herself, the tension in her shoulders, told him that the beam had done damage. "You're back," he said, forcing himself to his feet despite his exhausted muscles. "Let me see. I am fine." "You are not fine. You just had half a barn beam crushing your spine. Let me see the damage." Khriza hesitated, her expression guarded and uncertain. Then slowly, wincing with the movement, she pulled her shirt up to reveal her back. Ryder hissed in sympathy. An angry red line ran diagonally across her back from her left shoulder to her right hip, already darkening to purple in places. The skin was not broken, but the bruising was spectacular and clearly painful. He could see her muscles trembling with the effort of holding the position. "You need a healer," he said. "No healer will see an orc. You know this. Then you need someone who knows herbs and medicine. You need rest. I need to leave before someone sees me with you," Khriza interrupted, lowering her shirt and slowly, carefully getting to her feet. She swayed slightly but steadied herself with visible effort. "You have done more than I could ever have expected from a human. More than I have ever heard of any human doing for one of my kind. But if we are seen together, they will assume the worst. They will think I attacked you or that you are a traitor to your people for helping me. Either way, it will end badly." She was right, and Ryder knew it. The border territories were not kind to those who crossed the invisible lines between species, but the thought of letting her walk away, injured and alone, sat wrong in his gut. "Where will you go?" he asked. "I have a camp. 2 days north in the forest. I will be fine once I reach it." 2 days is a long time when you are hurt. You need to rest, at least for tonight. "I cannot stay here. This barn is too close to the road." Ryder made a decision that he knew he would either thank himself for or curse himself for in the days to come. "My farm. It is isolated. No one comes by without reason. You can rest there, at least until morning. Let me give you food and medicine, let you sleep somewhere dry. Then if you want to leave, I will not stop you." Khriza looked at him with those golden eyes, and he could see the war happening behind them. Suspicion and gratitude, fear and desperate need, all battling for dominance. Finally she said, "Why would you do this? You do not know me. My people and yours are enemies. You have already risked enough." "Because leaving you here to suffer when I can help feels wrong," Ryder said simply. "Because you deserve kindness as much as anyone else. Because I lifted that beam and I am not about to waste that effort by letting you collapse in the woods before you reach safety." A ghost of a smile touched Khriza's lips, though it was strained with pain. "That last reason I believe most." "Come on," Ryder said, moving to her side. "Lean on me if you need to. It is not far." She did not lean on him, too proud or too wary, but she did walk beside him as they left the barn and made their way across the fields toward his property. The sun was lowering in the sky, painting everything in shades of gold and orange, and Ryder found himself grateful for the late hour. There would be fewer eyes to see them together. His farm was modest but well-maintained, a single-story house built of stone and timber with a thatched roof, a barn that was in considerably better repair than the Thornhill one, a chicken coop, and various outbuildings. Rye fields stretched behind the house, already harvested for the year, and a vegetable garden sat near the kitchen door. It was not much, but it was his, built with his own hands after he returned from the war. Khriza's eyes swept over everything as they approached, and Ryder wondered what she saw. A target, a temporary refuge, just another human homestead in an endless sea of them. "Inside," he said, opening the door and gesturing for her to enter. "Quickly, before the light fails completely and someone spots the smoke from my chimney with a stranger nearby." She ducked through the doorway, and Ryder followed, closing and barring the door behind them. The interior of his home was simple. One main room that served as kitchen and living space, with a fireplace along one wall and a table with 2 chairs near the center. A doorway led to his small bedroom and another to a storage room. Everything was clean and organized, though decidedly lacking in decoration. "Sit," Ryder said, pointing to one of the chairs. "I will make tea and get the medicine box." Khriza sat carefully, her movements stiff and pained. Ryder busied himself with building up the fire, hanging a kettle, and retrieving a wooden box from a high shelf. His mother had been the village healer before the war, and she had taught him the basics of treating wounds and illnesses. He had expanded that knowledge considerably during his time as a soldier, when knowing how to keep a man alive, until the real healers arrived, often meant the difference between bringing a brother home and burying him in foreign soil. He mixed willow bark tea for the pain and retrieved a jar of arnica salve for the bruising. When the tea was ready, he poured 2 cups and brought everything to the table, settling into the chair across from her. "Drink this," he said, pushing one cup toward her. "It will help with the pain. And I need to apply this salve to your back, if you will allow it." Khriza wrapped her hands around the cup, and Ryder noticed that they were shaking slightly. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the reality of her injury was setting in. She drank deeply, then set the cup down and met his eyes. "I do not understand you, Ryder Merrick. We are taught that humans are cruel, that they see us as monsters fit only for killing. Yet you lifted a beam that should have been impossible to move, and now you offer me tea and medicine in your home. Why?" Ryder considered the question as he sipped his own tea. "I fought in the war," he said finally. 3 years on the border fighting your people. I killed orcs. I saw friends killed by orcs, and I learned something that most people never want to admit." "What is that?" "That there is no difference between the screams. When a man is dying, when an orc is dying, they sound the same. They cry for the same things: home, family, one more day. After a while I realized we were all just people killing people because someone told us we were supposed to hate each other." Khriza was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said, "I was a warrior too, for 5 years. I also killed humans. I also watched friends die. And I also came to understand that this war serves no one but those who profit from it. Is that why you are here? In human lands?" "I was exiled," she said, and there was pain in her voice that had nothing to do with her physical injuries. "I spoke against the clan's war chief. I said we should seek peace, that we should stop sending our young to die for pride and old grudges. He said I was weak, that I had no honor. He cast me out. I have been wandering for 2 months, trying to find somewhere I could exist without being hunted by both sides." Ryder felt a surge of sympathy for her. He knew what it was like to be cast adrift, to no longer fit into the world you had known. When he returned from the war, he had found he could not go back to his old life in the village, surrounded by people who had not seen what he had seen, and could not understand why he no longer cheered at the stories of orc defeats. "You can stay here," he heard himself say. "Not just tonight. As long as you need." Khriza looked startled. "That is impossible. Even if you meant it, which I doubt, the risk to you would be too great." "I do mean it. And yes, there is risk. But this farm is isolated. I rarely have visitors, and those I do have I see coming from a long way off. The nearest neighbor is 3 miles south, and they mind their own business. You could rest here, heal properly, figure out what you want to do next. Why would you offer this? Because I can. Because it is the right thing to do, because—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Because I am tired of being alone, and you are clearly tired of running. Maybe we could both use a break from the world for a little while." She studied him for a long time, those golden eyes searching his face as if trying to read his soul. Finally, she nodded slowly. "1 week," she said. "I will stay 1 week until my back heals enough to travel safely. After that, I will leave." "Agreed, agreed," Ryder said, though he was already wondering if a week would be enough. "Now let me see to your back. The sooner we treat it, the better it will heal." Khriza stood and turned, lifting her shirt again to expose the angry bruising. Ryder opened the jar of salve, the sharp scent of arnica filling the air, and carefully began to apply it to her injured back. His touch was gentle but firm, working the medicine into her skin with practiced ease. He could feel the heat of the inflammation, the tension in her muscles, and he worked slowly, methodically, covering every inch of the bruised area. Khriza stood rigid at first, clearly unused to being touched with such care. But gradually, as the medicine began to work and the pain lessened, he felt her relax slightly. Neither of them spoke, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the soft movements of his hands against her skin. When he finished, he wiped his hands clean and said, That should help. I will apply it again tomorrow morning and evening until the bruising fades. Thank you, Khriza said quietly, lowering her shirt and turning to face him. I have never been treated with such kindness by a human before. Then humans have been fools, Ryder said. You can sleep in my bed tonight. I will take the floor by the fire. Absolutely not. You already gave me tea and medicine. I will not take your bed as well. You are injured. You need proper rest. So do you after lifting that beam. Your body must be screaming. She was not wrong. Now that the urgency of the situation had passed, Ryder was becoming acutely aware of every muscle he had strained, every tendon he had pushed past its limits. His arms felt like lead weights and his back was beginning to stiffen. How about this? Khriza said, a hint of amusement in her voice. We are both injured and stubborn. You take the bed, I will take the floor, and we will not argue about it any more tonight. Ryder opened his mouth to protest, then closed it again. He was too tired to argue, and from the look on Khriza's face, she was not going to budge. Fine, he said. But you get the good blankets. He gathered his warmest blankets and several cushions from the storage room, making a comfortable nest near the fireplace. Khriza watched with approval, then settled herself onto it with a barely suppressed groan of relief. Ryder banked the fire to burn through the night and retreated to his bedroom, but he found himself lying awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling and wondering what he had gotten himself into. He had an orc woman in his house, an enemy by all the laws and customs of his people. If anyone found out, he would be branded a traitor at best, hanged at worst. And yet, when he closed his eyes, all he could see was the way Khriza had looked at him when he told her he would lift that beam, like she wanted desperately to believe it was possible but had learned too well that hope was a dangerous thing. He had made the right choice. He was sure of that. He just hoped it would not destroy them both. The next morning, Ryder woke to the smell of cooking, which was unusual enough to bring him fully alert immediately. He dressed quickly and emerged from his bedroom to find Khriza standing at his stove, carefully stirring something in a pan. She moved stiffly, clearly still in pain, but she moved with purpose. You should not be up, he said. You should be resting. I have rested enough, Khriza replied without turning around. And you fed me last night. The least I can do is make breakfast. With what ingredients? I know I did not have much in the pantry. You had eggs from your chickens, wild onions growing by your door, and some slightly stale bread. It is not a feast, but it will suffice. She served them both, and Ryder had to admit the simple meal was delicious. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Khriza spoke. Your farm is well maintained. You must work very hard. It keeps me busy. Better than the alternative. Which is, thinking too much about things I cannot change. Khriza nodded, understanding. The war. Among other things. Ryder paused, then asked, what were you doing in that barn anyway? It has been abandoned for years. I was looking for shelter. I had been traveling all night and needed somewhere to rest out of sight. The barn seemed perfect until I climbed into the loft and the floor gave way beneath me. I fell, and when I tried to get up, the whole structure started coming down. I barely got clear of the worst of it, but not clear enough. You are lucky to be alive. I am lucky you heard me. Luckier still that you came to help instead of leaving me to die or putting an arrow in me. I am not in the habit of shooting injured people. Most humans would not see me as a person to begin with. The bitterness in her voice was sharp and painful to hear. Ryder set down his fork and met her eyes across the table. I see you as a person, Khriza. I hope you believe that. She held his gaze for a moment, then nodded slowly. I am beginning to. After breakfast, Ryder showed her around the property, mostly so she would know the layout if she needed to hide quickly. His farm was bordered on 3 sides by forest, and on the fourth by open fields, giving good sight lines for anyone approaching. The barn held his 2 horses, a milk cow, and various tools and equipment. The chicken coop housed a dozen hens and a rooster who regarded them with suspicious eyes. "If anyone comes," Ryder said, "there is a root cellar beneath the kitchen with an entrance hidden under a rug. It is not comfortable, but it is secure and soundproof, or you can go into the forest. There are deer trails that will take you deep into the woods within minutes. You have thought about this?" "I have learned to plan for trouble. Old habit from the war." They spent the rest of the day working around the farm together. Khriza insisted on helping despite her injury, and Ryder had to admit she was remarkably capable. She mended fences with practiced efficiency, helped him repair a broken shutter, and even climbed onto the roof to replace some damaged thatch, moving carefully but confidently despite the pain he knew she must be feeling. As they worked, they talked. Small things at first, safe topics like the weather and the land. But gradually the conversations deepened. Khriza told him about growing up in her clan, training as a warrior from childhood, learning to hunt and track and fight. Ryder told her about his family, his parents who had died while he was at war, the younger sister who had married and moved away before he returned. "You miss them?" Khriza asked as they sat on the porch steps that evening, watching the sun set over the fields. "Every day," Ryder admitted. "But I think the people they knew, the person I was before the war, is gone. I do not know if we would even recognize each other now." "I understand that feeling. I look at myself sometimes and wonder where the girl who believed in honor and glory went. When did she become this cynical wanderer? Maybe she is not gone. Maybe she just learned that honor and glory look different than she was taught." Khriza smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. "You are wiser than you look, Ryder Merrick. I will take that as a compliment." That night they fell into an easy routine. Ryder applied more salve to Khriza's back, which was already looking better though still spectacularly bruised. She made dinner while he fed the animals. They ate together, talking and laughing, and Ryder realized he could not remember the last time his house had felt this alive. When it was time to sleep, Khriza once again insisted on taking the floor by the fire, and once again Ryder was too tired to argue effectively. But as he lay in bed, listening to the quiet sounds of her breathing from the other room, he felt something he had not felt in years: peace. The days began to blend together in the best possible way. Morning started with breakfast together, followed by the day's work around the farm. Khriza proved to be an excellent worker, strong and skilled and never complaining even when he knew she was in pain. Her back healed steadily under his care, the angry purple bruising fading to green, and then yellow. They fell into a rhythm, working side by side, anticipating each other's needs and movements with increasing ease. Khriza had a gift for animal handling, and his normally skittish horses took to her immediately. She spent hours in the barn with them, brushing their coats and speaking to them in her own language, low musical sounds that seemed to calm them. In the evenings they would sit on the porch and talk, or sometimes just sit in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. Ryder found himself learning to read her expressions, the subtle shifts in her features that indicated amusement or concern or deep thought. He learned that she loved thunderstorms, that she had a beautiful singing voice she rarely used, that she could identify every plant and tree in the forest and knew which were medicinal and which were poisonous. Khriza, in turn, learned about him. She discovered his love of books, the small collection he kept in a trunk that had been his mother's. She learned that he carved wood in the evenings when his hands needed something to do, making small figures of animals that were surprisingly detailed and lifelike. She found out that he had nightmares sometimes, waking with a gasp that he tried to muffle. And on those nights, she would speak softly from her place by the fire, telling him stories from her childhood until his breathing steadied again. The week they had agreed upon passed, and neither of them mentioned it. It was 2 weeks after the barn collapse when the first real test came. Ryder was in the barn, mucking out the stalls when he heard horses approaching. He immediately went still, listening, then moved quickly to the barn door. 3 riders were coming up the road toward his property, and he recognized them immediately. His neighbor Silas Garrett and 2 of his sons, probably on their way to town and stopping by to visit. "Khriza," he called urgently. "Visitors, hide now." She appeared from behind the house where she had been working in the garden, assessed the situation immediately, and disappeared into the forest with the speed and silence of a ghost. Ryder barely had time to brush the straw off his clothes and force a casual expression onto his face before the 3 men rode into his yard. "Ryder," Silas called out, a broad smile on his weathered face. "Good to see you, boy. Been too long since we talked." "Silas," Ryder replied, moving to greet them. "What brings you out this way? Heading to town for supplies. Thought we would check in, see how you are managing. Place looks good. Better than good, actually. Been doing some repairs." Ryder's heart sank as he noticed Silas looking around the property with an assessing eye. The new fence sections, the repaired roof, the general air of improved maintenance were all obvious. "Just keeping busy," Ryder said carefully. "You know how it is. Always something that needs fixing." "Must have been working like a demon to get so much done," Silas's older son, Marcus, observed. "Some of these repairs look like they would take 2 men. I have time on my hands." Silas dismounted and walked slowly around the yard, his eyes taking in every detail. Ryder fought the urge to look toward the forest to give away Khriza's hiding place. Instead, he kept his expression neutral and his posture relaxed. "You eating all right?" Silas asked. "Saw smoke from your chimney at odd times. Noticed your chickens look well fed and your garden has been expanded." "I am taking better care of things, that is all." Silas stopped in front of Ryder, studying his face. "You would tell me if you had trouble, would you not? If someone was bothering you, or if you needed help." For a moment Ryder wondered if Silas suspected something. But then he realized the older man's concern was genuine, not suspicious. He thought Ryder might be struggling, not hiding an orc in his home. "I would tell you," Ryder lied, feeling guilty for the deception but knowing it was necessary. "Everything is fine, Silas, I promise." Silas clapped him on the shoulder. "Good man. You know where to find us if you need anything. We should have you over for dinner soon. Sarah asks about you all the time." "That would be nice," Ryder said, though he had no idea how he would manage it now. The 3 men mounted up and rode off, calling farewells over their shoulders. Ryder waited until they were completely out of sight before releasing the breath he had been holding. A few minutes later, Khriza emerged from the tree line, moving cautiously. "That was close," she said quietly. "Too close. Silas is observant. He noticed all the work we have been doing." "I told you I should leave. My being here puts you in danger." "No." The word came out more forcefully than Ryder intended. "You are not leaving, we just need to be more careful. Ryder, I do not want you to leave." He met her eyes, and the truth of his words hung in the air between them. "I know it is complicated, I know it is dangerous, but I do not want you to leave." Khriza looked at him for a long moment, and he could see the conflict in her expression. Finally she said, "I do not want to leave either." But wanting something does not make it safe or wise. Since when have either of us been particularly safe or wise? That earned him a small smile. Fair point. They went back to work, but something had shifted between them. The words had been spoken aloud now, the acknowledgement that this arrangement had become more than just temporary shelter. That night, as they sat on the porch in the gathering darkness, Khriza spoke quietly. "In my clan, there is a saying, 'The heart knows no borders.' It was always used as a warning about the danger of forming attachments to those outside the clan. I never understood it until now." "And now?" Ryder asked, his own heart beating faster. "Now I understand it perfectly, and I understand why it frightened them. Does it frighten you?" Khriza turned to look at him, and in the fading light her eyes were luminous. "Yes, but not enough to make me leave." Ryder reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. Her skin was warm and rough with calluses that matched his own. They sat like that for a long time, holding hands in the darkness, neither speaking because there were no words for what they were feeling. The next few weeks brought a subtle but profound change to their relationship. They were more careful about watching for visitors, and Khriza became adept at disappearing at the first sign of anyone approaching. But when they were alone, which was most of the time, they were simply themselves. No masks, no pretense, just two people learning to trust each other and gradually to care for each other. Ryder taught Khriza to read, or rather to read human letters, since she was literate in her own language. They would sit together in the evenings, Khriza painstakingly working through his books while Ryder watched with endless patience, correcting her pronunciation and explaining unfamiliar words. Her joy when she finished her first complete book was so pure and unguarded that it made his chest ache. Khriza taught Ryder some of the skills she had learned as a warrior and hunter. She showed him how to move silently through the forest, how to read tracks and signs that he would have missed, how to use a bow with the efficiency and grace that came from years of practice. They would go hunting together, and Khriza's skill at bringing down game meant they ate better than Ryder had in years. They cooked together, worked together, laughed together. They learned each other's habits and preferences. Ryder discovered that Khriza liked her tea almost too hot to drink, and that she sang while she worked when she thought he could not hear. Khriza learned that Ryder was hopeless at sewing but could fix anything mechanical, and that he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. And slowly, carefully, they learned to touch each other. Small things at first, a hand on the shoulder in passing, sitting close enough that their arms brushed. The daily ritual of Ryder tending to Khriza's healing back, which had long since stopped being necessary, but which neither of them wanted to give up. It was a month after the barn collapse, when Ryder finally admitted to himself that what he felt for Khriza had grown far beyond simple attraction or fondness. He was falling in love with her, deeply and irrevocably, and the realization both thrilled and terrified him. The problem was that he had no idea how she felt about him. She clearly cared for him, enjoyed his company, trusted him. But was it love or just gratitude and companionship? And even if it was love, what future could they possibly have? They were from different worlds, different species, and those worlds were actively at war with each other. He was brooding about this one afternoon while repairing a plow in the barn when Khriza found him. She stood in the doorway for a moment, silhouetted against the bright autumn sun, and Ryder's breath caught at the sight of her. She had braided her hair with small wildflowers woven through it, something he had never seen her do before, and the effect was devastatingly beautiful. "You have been quiet today," she observed, coming to sit beside him on the barn floor. "What troubles you?" "Nothing, everything, I do not know." "That is not an answer." Ryder set down his tools and turned to face her fully. "What are we doing, Khriza?" "We keep dancing around it, but we both know this cannot last forever. Eventually someone will find out. Eventually you will want to move on, or I will get caught harboring you, or 100 other things that will tear this apart." "I know," she said quietly. "I think about it every day. And and I have no answers, only questions, only fears, but also—" She paused, reaching out to touch his face with a gentleness that made his heart stutter. "Also hope, also joy, also feelings I did not think I was capable of anymore." "What kind of feelings?" Ryder asked, hardly daring to breathe. Khriza's golden eyes held his, and he could see vulnerability there, and fear, and something deeper that made hope flare in his chest. "The kind that make me want to stay. The kind that make me imagine a future I know is impossible. The kind that make me think maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to make this work." "I want that too," Ryder said, his voice rough with emotion. "God help me, I want that more than anything. I love you, Khriza. I know it is complicated and dangerous and probably insane, but I love you." For a moment Khriza just stared at him, her eyes wide and her tusked mouth slightly open in shock. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face, radiant and full of wonder. "I love you too, Ryder Merrick. I have been trying not to, trying to protect my heart, but it is useless. I love you." He kissed her then, or maybe she kissed him, or maybe they moved together at the same instant. It did not matter. What mattered was the feel of her lips against his, the way her tusks pressed gently against his skin, the taste of her mouth and the desperate joy that surged through him as she kissed him back with equal passion. They broke apart, both breathing hard, and Ryder rested his forehead against hers. "We will figure this out," he said. "I do not know how yet, but we will find a way." "You make me believe it is possible," Khriza whispered. "You make me believe in impossible things." They held each other in the dusty barn, sunlight streaming through the gaps in the walls, and for that moment the rest of the world and all its complications fell away. There was only them, and the love they had found in the most unlikely of circumstances. But the world has a way of intruding on private moments of joy, and their world came crashing back in less than a week later. It was early morning, and Ryder was checking his snares in the forest while Khriza worked on breakfast. He was about a half-mile from the house when he heard the dogs. Hunting dogs, by the sound of them, and more than a few. Ryder's blood ran cold as he heard them baying in the distance, growing closer. Hunting parties were not uncommon in the area, especially with winter approaching and people stocking their larders. But something about the urgency of the dogs, the organization of the barking, spoke of something more sinister. They were hunting someone, not something. He ran, crashing through the underbrush with no care for stealth, driven by a terrible certainty. The dogs were heading toward his farm, and Khriza was there alone. He burst out of the tree line to see chaos. 6 men on horseback had surrounded his house, and 2 of them held leashes attached to massive hunting dogs that were scratching at his door and howling. The men were armed, and even from a distance Ryder could see the grim determination on their faces. "Khriza," he shouted, sprinting across the field. "Run!" The men turned at his shout, and one of them, a tall man with a cruel face that Ryder recognized as Wade Taylor from a neighboring town, called out, "Stay back, Merrick. We have business here." "That is my property. You have no right, we have every right," Wade interrupted. "We tracked an orc to this area. A scout from what we can tell, probably spying for an attack force. The dogs led us here, to your farm." Ryder's mind raced. He had to protect Khriza, but he could not be too obvious about it. "There is no orc here. Your dogs are wrong." "Dogs do not lie," another man said. "But you might stand aside." "No," Wade's hand moved to his sword. "We can do this easy or hard, Merrick, your choice. But we are going in that house." Before Ryder could respond, the door opened. Khriza stood in the doorway, and she had clearly armed herself. She wore leather armor that Ryder had not known she possessed, and her bow was in her hand with an arrow already nocked. She looked every inch the warrior she had been trained to be, fierce and beautiful and terrifying. You want me. She called out. Here I am, but you leave him alone. Ryder Merrick has done nothing wrong. You are harboring an orc, Wade shouted at Ryder. That is treason. She was injured. I gave her shelter. That is not treason, that is basic human decency. Orcs are not human, they are monsters. And you are a traitor for protecting one. The men began to close in, and Ryder saw Khriza's bow come up, tracking Wade's chest. Do not come closer, she warned. I do not wish to kill anyone, but I will if I must. 1 orc against 6 armed men, Wade said with a nasty smile. I like those odds. The odds are 5 to 6, Ryder said, moving to stand beside Khriza, his own sword drawn. And if you knew anything about orc warriors, you would know the numbers mean nothing. For a moment everyone froze, a tableau of potential violence waiting for a single spark to explode. Then a voice cut through the tension, old and commanding and utterly unexpected. Everyone lower your weapons. Now. Silas Garrett rode into the yard on his old bay mare, and behind him were his 2 sons. All 3 were armed, and they positioned themselves carefully between Ryder's group and Wade's. This does not concern you, Garrett, Wade said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. The hell it does not. Ryder is my neighbor, and I will not stand by while you threaten him on his own property. Lower your weapons. He is harboring an orc. I heard you the first time. I also heard him say he gave shelter to someone who was injured. Is that true, Ryder? Yes, Ryder said, grateful for the intervention even as he wondered how much it would cost him. She was trapped under a collapsed beam. I got her out and gave her a place to recover. That is all. That is not all, Wade protested. She is an orc, a spy. She looks like an exiled warrior trying to survive to me, Silas said calmly. And unless you have proof she is spying, which I notice you have not mentioned, then all I see here is a man who helped someone in need and a bunch of thugs who tracked her down like an animal. She is not human. So what? Law says you cannot harm someone unless they have committed a crime or pose an immediate threat. Has this woman committed a crime? Wade hesitated, clearly not having expected to have to justify himself. She is an orc. That is enough. No, Silas said flatly. It is not. And I am a magistrate's deputy, so I actually know what I am talking about. You have no legal grounds to be here, and you are trespassing. Leave. Now. The magistrate will hear about this. I am sure he will, and I will be happy to testify about what I saw here. A peaceable woman threatened by armed men on private property. I wonder how he will rule on that. Wade's face was red with anger, but he was smart enough to know he was beaten. This is not over, he said to Ryder, his voice venomous. You protect a monster, you become a monster. We will remember this. Noted, Ryder said, his voice hard. Now get off my land. The 6 men rode away, though Wade looked back several times, his expression promising future trouble. When they were finally out of sight, Ryder felt his knees go weak with relief. He sheathed his sword and turned to Silas. Thank you. I do not know what would have happened if you had not arrived. I was on my way to check on you when I saw the hunting party heading this way. Had a bad feeling. Silas looked at Khriza, who had lowered her bow but still stood ready. So. An orc. Did not see that coming. I can explain, do not bother. I heard enough. You found her injured and helped her. That is the kind of man you are, Ryder. I am not surprised. Silas dismounted and walked closer, stopping a respectful distance from Khriza. Madam, my name is Silas Garrett. I apologize for the behavior of those men. Not all humans are like that. Khriza lowered her bow completely, clearly surprised by the civility. Thank you for your intervention, Silas Garrett. I am Khriza. Pleasure to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Silas turned back to Ryder. We need to talk. Inside, preferably. They all went into the house, and Silas's sons, Marcus and younger Timothy, stood guard outside to watch for anyone approaching. Over tea that Khriza served with shaking hands, Silas laid out the reality of their situation. Wade Taylor is mean, but he is not stupid. He will go to the magistrate and he will bring others. They will come back, and next time there will be more of them. You cannot stay here, either of you. This is my home, Ryder said stubbornly, and you will lose it if you are arrested for treason. Or worse, you will lose your life. Silas leaned forward, his expression serious. I am not saying this to be cruel. I am saying this because I care about you and because I have eyes. I saw how you looked at each other. I saw how you stood together. This is more than just giving shelter, is it not? Ryder and Khriza exchanged a glance, and he saw the question in her eyes. He nodded slightly, giving permission, and she reached across the table to take his hand. Silas's eyebrows rose, but he did not look disapproving, just sad. We love each other, Ryder said simply. I know how it sounds. I know it is impossible, but it is the truth. Then you need to leave, Silas said gently. Both of you, find somewhere you can be together without fear, because there is no place for you here, not anymore, not after today. Where would we even go? Khriza asked. Humans hate orcs. Orcs hate humans. There is nowhere in this world that would accept us. There are places, Silas said thoughtfully. I have heard stories. Far to the west, past the mountains, there are communities of people who rejected the war, mixed communities where species do not matter as much as character. I do not know if the stories are true, but I have heard them from enough sources to think there might be something to them. That is a month's journey at least, Ryder said. Maybe more, through dangerous territory. Yes, but what is the alternative? Stay here and be hunted, separated, killed. Silas shook his head. If you love each other as you say you do, then you fight for it. You run, you hide, you travel to the ends of the earth if you must. But you do not give up. Ryder looked at Khriza, and he saw his own feelings reflected in her eyes. Fear, yes, but also determination. Also love. Also hope. When would we need to leave? He asked Silas. Tonight, if possible. Tomorrow morning at the latest. Wade will not wait long to gather reinforcements. The rest of the day passed in a blur of frantic preparation. Ryder packed his most essential belongings, sold Silas his farm for a fraction of its worth in exchange for immediate payment in coin and supplies. They gathered food, tools, weapons, warm clothing. Silas's sons rode to neighboring farms with a story about Ryder taking a journey to visit family, buying them precious time before anyone questioned his absence. Khriza moved through it all with quiet efficiency, helping him pack, making decisions about what was essential and what could be left behind. She seemed calmer than he felt, more resigned to the necessity of leaving. But then, she had been running for months. This was simply more of the same for her. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ryder stood in his doorway and looked out over his farm. The fields he had planted, the fences he had mended, the house he had built with his own hands. He was giving up everything he had worked for, everything he had built after the war. But when Khriza came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his, he knew it was worth it. This farm was just a place. She was home. Are you ready? She asked softly. No, he admitted, but I am willing. They left as the last light faded from the sky, leading 2 horses packed with supplies. Silas and his sons rode with them to the edge of the forest, then said their farewells. There is a trading post 3 days west, Silas said, handing Ryder a roughly drawn map. The owner, a woman named Judith Chen, she is sympathetic to people in your situation. Tell her I sent you. She will point you toward the next safe stop. Thank you, Silas, for everything. Take care of each other, and Ryder, I am glad you found someone worth running for. A lot of people go their whole lives without that. They embraced quickly. Then Silas and his sons turned back toward their own farms, leaving Ryder and Khriza alone in the darkening forest. "Well," Khriza said, looking up at the stars beginning to emerge overhead. "This is not how I imagined my life going, me either. But I do not regret it. Do you?" She turned to him, and in the faint light he could see the smile on her face. "Not for a moment. Where you go, I go. That is all that matters now." They rode through the night, following game trails that Khriza knew, staying off the main roads. As the dawn broke, they were already many miles from Ryder's farm, deep in territory that few humans ventured into. They made camp in a sheltered hollow, taking turns sleeping and keeping watch, and when Ryder woke in the afternoon he found Khriza sitting beside him, gently stroking his hair. "I have been thinking," she said, "about what Silas said, about communities in the West where we could be accepted. Do you think they exist? I want to believe they do. I need to believe they do. Because the alternative is spending the rest of our lives running and hiding, and that is no life at all." "Then we will find them," Ryder said, sitting up and taking her hand. "However long it takes, however far we must go, we will find a place where we can be together without fear." "You make me believe in impossible things," Khriza said, echoing her words from that day in the barn. "You always have." They traveled for weeks, following Silas's map and the directions they received from Judith Chen at the trading post, who indeed proved to be sympathetic and helpful. The journey was hard, full of cold nights and dangerous encounters, both with humans who looked at Khriza with hatred and orcs who looked at Ryder the same way. They learned to avoid settlements entirely, to travel only at night when they could, to trust no one except each other. But there were good moments too. Evenings spent around a campfire, sharing stories and dreams. Mornings waking up in each other's arms, warm despite the cold. The growing certainty that what they had was real and worth fighting for. They crossed the border into the Western Territories 6 weeks after fleeing Ryder's farm. The land here was different, wilder, with mountains rising in the distance and forests so dense that sunlight barely penetrated to the floor. They followed a river for 3 days until they reached a valley that seemed to open up like a hidden world. And there, nestled in the valley, was a town. It was not large, perhaps 200 buildings, but it was clearly prosperous and well-maintained. And as they approached cautiously, Ryder felt his heart begin to pound with hope. Because walking through the streets were humans and orcs, side by side, working together, living together. An elderly human woman pruning a garden waved to an orc man passing by with a cart of vegetables. 2 children, one human and one orc, chased each other down the street laughing. A mixed group sat outside what looked like a tavern, sharing drinks and conversation. "Is this real?" Khriza whispered, her voice full of wonder and disbelief. "I think so," Ryder said. "I think we found it." They were met at the edge of town by a woman in her 40s, human, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "Welcome to Haven," she said. "I am Mayor Dorothea Thorne. You two look like you have come a long way." "We have," Ryder said. "We are looking for a place where we can be together without being hunted for it." Dorothea's eyes moved from Ryder to Khriza and back again, and a smile spread across her face. "Then you came to the right place. We are a community of refugees and exiles, people who rejected the hatred that defines the war. Here, the only thing that matters is your character and your willingness to contribute. Species, background, past mistakes, those things are left behind when you enter Haven. We can stay." Khriza asked, and there was such hope in her voice that it made Ryder's chest ache. "If you want to, yes. We always need more hands. What skills do you have?" "I am a farmer," Ryder said, "and I know some healing." "She is a hunter and warrior, skilled with animals and plants." "Perfect." We have land that needs working and always needs skilled hunters. Come, I will show you around and find you a place to stay while you get settled." Dorothea led them through the town, and everywhere Ryder looked he saw the impossible made real. Humans and orcs working together, living together, clearly at ease with each other in a way he had never imagined possible. Children of both species attended a school together. A human blacksmith worked alongside an orc apprentice. An elderly orc woman taught a group of mixed young adults some kind of martial art in a practice yard. It was everything they had hoped for, and had barely dared to believe could exist. Dorothea found them a small house on the edge of town with a plot of land suitable for farming. It was modest but well built, with 2 rooms and a fireplace and windows that looked out over the valley. It was perfect. The house belonged to a couple who recently moved on to start a farm further west, Dorothea explained. It is yours if you want it. No cost, though we do expect everyone to contribute to the community in whatever way they can. We can do that, Ryder said. Thank you so much. Thank Silas Garrett when you write to him. He is the one who told us to watch for you. Sent a message ahead saying you were coming and that you were good people who deserved a chance. Dorothea smiled. Welcome to Haven. I hope you will be happy here. She left them alone in their new home, and for a moment, Ryder and Khriza just stood in the main room, holding hands, barely able to process that they were safe, that they had found a place where they could be together. Then Khriza turned to him, tears streaming down her face, and pulled him into a fierce embrace. "We made it," she whispered. "We actually made it." "We did," Ryder said, his own eyes wet. "Together." They spent the next few weeks settling into life in Haven. Ryder began working the land, preparing it for spring planting, while Khriza joined the hunting teams that kept the community supplied with meat. They made friends cautiously at first, then more easily as they realized that here, their relationship was not scandalous or shocking. It was simply normal. They met other mixed couples, human and orc, who welcomed them warmly and shared their own stories of finding refuge in Haven. They learned the rhythms of the community, the festivals and traditions that had been built from a blending of cultures. They began to build a life. 3 months after arriving in Haven, on a crisp winter morning with snow falling gently outside, Ryder woke before dawn and lay watching Khriza sleep beside him. She was beautiful in the soft light, her face peaceful and unguarded in a way it had not been when they first met. The bruises on her back had long since healed, leaving only faint scars that he traced sometimes with his fingers, remembering the day he had lifted the impossible beam to free her. That had been the beginning of everything. The moment that had set them on this path that led to this place, this life, this love. Khriza stirred and opened her eyes, smiling when she saw him watching her. "What are you thinking about?" she asked sleepily. "About how lucky I am. About how I almost did not run toward that scream that day. About how different everything would be if I had made a different choice. But you did not. You ran toward danger to help someone you did not know. That is who you are, Ryder Merrick." She reached up to touch his face. "That is why I love you. I love you too, more than I can put into words." "Then show me with actions instead." She pulled him down for a kiss, slow and sweet and full of promise. Later, as they dressed and prepared to face the day, Ryder made a decision. "Khriza," he said, his heart pounding, "I want to ask you something." She turned to him, curious. "What is it?" He took her hands in his, suddenly nervous despite everything they had been through together. "We have built a life here, a good life, and I want to make it official. I want everyone to know that you are mine and I am yours forever. So I am asking, will you marry me?" Khriza's eyes went wide, and for a moment she just stared at him. Then a brilliant smile broke across her face and she launched herself at him, nearly knocking him over with the force of her embrace. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, of course, yes. They were married a week later in a ceremony that blended human and orc traditions, officiated by Mayor Dorothea and witnessed by the entire community. Khriza wore a dress of deep blue that made her green skin glow, with flowers woven into her braided hair. Ryder wore his best clothes, cleaned and mended for the occasion, and could not stop smiling when they exchanged vows, speaking promises of love and loyalty and partnership. Ryder felt like his heart might burst with joy. This woman, this incredible, fierce, beautiful woman, was choosing him just as he was choosing her. Against all odds, despite everything the world had thrown at them, they had found each other and fought to stay together. "I vow to lift you up when you fall," Ryder said, his voice thick with emotion. "To be your strength when you need it, to stand beside you through whatever comes, to love you with everything I am for all the days of my life." "I vow to trust you when fear tells me not to," Khriza said, her golden eyes locked on his. "To be your home when the world is cold, to fight for our love and our life together, to cherish you and honor you and love you now and always." When they kissed to seal their vows, the assembled crowd cheered, and Ryder thought he had never heard a sweeter sound. The celebration lasted into the night, with music and dancing and food shared by all. Ryder danced with his wife, the words still strange and wonderful in his mind, and felt more alive than he had in years. Maybe more alive than he had ever been. As the party finally began to wind down and they made their way back to their house, Khriza leaned against him, comfortable and happy. "Do you remember," she said, "when I told you that you made me believe in impossible things? I remember. I want you to know that you still do, every single day. This life we have built, this love we share, it should not be possible, but it is, because of you. Because you were brave enough to run toward danger instead of away from it. Because you saw me as a person worth saving instead of a monster to fear." "You were never a monster," Ryder said firmly. "You were always a woman who deserved kindness and safety and love. I just happened to be the one lucky enough to provide it." They reached their home and went inside, closing the door on the cold night air. Their home, their life, their future, stretching out before them full of possibility and promise. That night, as they lay together in their bed, warm and safe and loved, Ryder thought about the journey that had brought them here. The collapsed beam and the impossible lift. The weeks of hiding and growing trust. The flight from his farm and the long journey west. Every step had been hard, every choice fraught with danger and uncertainty. But it had all been worth it for this, for her, for them. "Thank you," Khriza whispered in the darkness, her head resting on his chest. "For what? For being you, for saving me, for loving me. For giving me a life I never dreamed I could have." "You gave me the same thing," Ryder said, tightening his arms around her. "We saved each other." "Yes," she agreed, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "We did." Spring came to Haven with an explosion of color and life. Ryder worked his fields, planting crops that would feed the community, while Khriza hunted and helped train some of the younger residents in tracking and wilderness survival. They settled into the rhythms of married life, learning the small intimacies of sharing space and time and dreams. They had disagreements sometimes, about small things and occasionally larger ones, but they talked through them with the honesty and respect they had built from the beginning. They laughed together often, finding joy in the simple pleasures of their daily life. They made plans for the future, talking about expanding their house, about maybe having children someday, about growing old together in this place that had welcomed them. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sun set over the valley, Khriza said thoughtfully, "Sometimes I think about that day in the barn, about how close I came to dying there. If you had not heard me scream, if you had decided the danger was too great, if you had not been strong enough to lift that beam, so many things had to go exactly right for us to be here now. I think about that too, Ryder admitted. About how easily we could have missed each other. About how chance and choice brought us together. Do you ever regret it? What you gave up? Ryder turned to look at her, this woman he loved more than life itself, and shook his head firmly. Not for a single moment. That farm was just a place. You are my home now. You and this life we are building together. Good, Khriza said, smiling, because you are stuck with me now. I can think of worse fates. She laughed and leaned against him, and they sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge. Around them, Haven settled into its evening routines. Lights appeared in windows. The sounds of families gathering for dinner drifted on the breeze. Somewhere a child laughed, the sound bright and carefree. This was their world now. A world where love mattered more than species, where character counted more than background, where two people who should have been enemies had become partners in building a life worth living. It had taken courage to get here, and sacrifice, and no small amount of luck, but they had made it. Together. And together, they would face whatever came next, secure in the knowledge that their love was strong enough to overcome any obstacle. Ryder took Khriza's hand and laced his fingers through hers, marveling as he always did at how perfectly they fit together despite all the ways they were different. She squeezed back, a gentle pressure that said everything words could not. The barn beam had come down across her back, and he had lifted what three men could not to free her. But in saving her, she had saved him too. From loneliness, from bitterness, from a life half lived in the shadow of past pain. They had saved each other, and in doing so, had found something neither had been looking for but both desperately needed. They had found home. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, Ryder and Khriza sat together on their porch, holding hands and dreaming of their future. A future they would build together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of love at a time. And that was enough. More than enough, it was everything.